Is Spain different? Myths and truths of a nation in constant contradiction. Are we Spaniards different from other peoples? All nations have their idiosyncrasies, history, and evolution. We Spaniards are not very different in that. But it is a reality, even today, that our self-esteem as a nation is one of the lowest in the world. This contradicts our own history, that of a people who managed to maintain a great empire for 3 centuries, who became the center of the world, and on whose territories the sun never set. According to the Cervantes Institute, currently 7.5% of the world's population speak Spanish. Around 600 million people in the world are Spanish speakers, or have Spanish as their second language. This explains why the language born in Castile is the second most spoken in the world, after Mandarin Chinese. It was necessary for a number of people who were neither born nor educated in Spanish culture, commonly called Hispanists, to study and write about our history from a neutral and realistic perspective. After Christopher Columbus discovered America, the Spanish Empire became the gateway to communication with the rest of the world. Hispanism began to take an interest in Spanish customs. The writer Washington Irving, who was a diplomat in Spain, became one of the first and most prolific disseminators of Hispanic culture. A large group of historians began to analyze our recent past in detail from the perspective offered by an external vision. Errol Brennan, Ian Gibson, Raymond Carr, John Eliot, Hugh Thomas, Paul Preston are just some of the most prestigious Hispanists who helped the world to banish that unfortunate phrase that Africa begins in the Pyrenees, which the French put into circulation to differentiate the liberal and developed France of the 19th century, in contrast to the closed and absolutist Spain. We Spaniards are not given to extolling our virtues, culture, and much less military exploits. Rather, we enjoy mortifying ourselves, denying or ignoring facts that other peoples would exploit with great skill. A famous phrase was attributed to the Prussian Marshal Otto von Bismarck: "Spain is the strongest country in the world. It has been trying to destroy itself for centuries, and it still hasn't succeeded." I think that this thought already defined our nature very well more than 150 years ago. A slogan began to take shape, still under the dictatorship, in the 1960s. Spain is different, by the Minister of Information and Tourism Manuel Fraga Iribarren. At a time when the Spanish were beginning to open up to the world, after the tremendous wound of the Civil War 20 years earlier. Previously, a brief and unattractive visit Spain was used by Franco's government to attract tourists, but without ignoring the overused cliché of flamenco, bullfighting, and Holy Week. Spain is different broke the mold. Against all odds, the success of that phrase and the campaign that surrounded it was resounding. Visitors began to discover other unexpected attractions in a supposedly isolated and uncultured country. Suddenly, the sun and beach gave way to heritage, culture, tradition, gastronomy, festivals, and, above all, the people. A different people? Probably. We Spaniards are equally different for the good and the bad. But if we look at the data, there are some that give us an extraordinarily positive score. Thus, the fourth Monitor report from Cambridge University Press, after several thousand interviews in various European countries, shows that Spaniards achieve the highest score in hospitality, solidarity, and friendliness. Solidarity can also be demonstrated with data. Since the 1990s, Spain has been the undisputed world leader in organ donation, year after year without interruption. Only in Europe do Spaniards double the number of donations compared to the rest of the countries. Once again, it is the people, the Spanish society, that make our country. Unfortunately, we Spaniards are not aware of this nature that is valued by other societies today. The self-destructive tendency of the Spanish always amplifies the negative aspects and minimizes the positive ones. At what point in history did we Spaniards embrace this unattractive feeling about ourselves? For example, the famous Black Legend, which was widely disseminated from the 16th century onwards by the British and Dutch empires, with notable success, attributing to the Spanish conquistadors a limitless cruelty towards the indigenous peoples, ignoring that the Catholic kings, through the laws of the Indies, granted the natives the same rights as the Spanish, being the origin of what is known today as human rights. These events, cleverly distorted by the other emerging powers, not only had repercussions in the Anglo-Saxon world, but the Spanish themselves gave them excessive credit, unjustly assuming them as a serious stain on our history. The persistence of the Spanish in avoiding recognizing our valuable contributions to the world is still in force. But even more flagrant is this insistence on denigrating history itself, as if it were a humiliating story that must be silenced. Other nations, in addition to documenting their most notable events, boast about it and proudly spread them. Only two historical events are enough to explain and confirm this reality. These are the naval battles of Trafalgar and Cartagena de Indias. In the first, the Spanish Armada suffered a severe setback on October 21, 1805, when facing the fleet of the Englishman Horatio Nelson off Cape Trafalgar in front of Cadiz. The English gave this event exceptional relevance. Nelson occupied a position as a national hero in English history. Books, novels, and poems were published. Streets and squares were named after him. Films were made. Plays were staged. Monuments and memorials were erected. He was represented in painting, music. In short, a people proud of its heroes who not only do not forget their history, but exalt it. The other historical event, and one that deserves a sad comparison, is that of the great Basque Spanish Admiral Blas de Lezo y Olabarrieta, nicknamed the Half-Man, due to his visible war wounds, which left him one-handed, one-eyed, and lame. On March 20th, 1741, the siege of Cartagena de Indias began by the English fleet of Admiral Vernon. The size of that fleet was impressive: 180 ships carrying 2,000 cannons and 30,000 combatants with all their arsenal. For his part, Blas de Lezo only had 6 sad ships and 3,000 men for his defense. The difference in forces was so abysmal that Vernon became overconfident and sent a message to England announcing that Cartagena had already fallen. In Spain, we would say that Vernon sold the bear's skin before hunting it, or that he put the cart before the horse. In the metropolis, the supposed fall of Cartagena de Indias was received with joy, and Parliament ordered the printing of stamps and the minting of commemorative coins, where one could read the motto, "Spanish pride humiliated by Vernon," with the image of Blas de Lezo kneeling before the Englishman handing over his sword. The reality in Cartagena was very different. For 2 months Vernon besieged and attempted various incursions, but with Blas de Lezo's strategy they were repelled one after another, with serious damage to the attacker. On May 20th, with his military forces greatly reduced, Vernon decided to withdraw. Blas de Lezo lost only 200 men and 6 ships, while Vernon lost about 9,000 men, and his fleet was reduced to only about 20 ships. England erased this event from its history books, considering it humiliating, while in Spain the news was barely reported. Today, and seen with great sadness, the vast majority of Spaniards do not know who Blas de Lezo was. A film has never been made about him. There are only a few streets in his honor, and a few monuments. If Blas de Lezo had been born English, today he would be known and recognized throughout the world, but we have come up against Spanish nature again. In that, we are also different. How far does Spanish apathy go in recognizing and being proud of all the good things it has brought to the world? In reality, it is quicker to list what we Spaniards definitely agree on, because of the few occasions when national pride flourishes and is not the subject of dispute. All Spaniards agree on something that is always a reason to celebrate: our gastronomy. There is no discussion here. Furthermore, a Spaniard will always vehemently defend that there is nothing like food like in Spain anywhere else. Of course, this quality is born from exceptional raw materials, which farmers, ranchers, and fishermen maintain and preserve with pride throughout our geography. From the fish and seafood from our coasts, beef, sheep and pork, olive oils, countless vegetables, fruits, nuts, cereals, legumes, through numerous processed products, such as wines, cheeses or sausages, and ending with the king of them all, which is, undoubtedly, Iberian ham. It is a symbol of identity, a culinary icon, a crown that has never been dethroned, and that has become a source of true national pride. For once, Spanish pride without question. But gastronomy in Spain is not just a simple matter of eating good food. In Spain, we love to socialize, and the act of getting together to eat is a social and cultural event of the first order. Food, most of the time, is just the reason for a family reunion, for a get-together among friends, or to share with someone we haven't seen for a while. And the best thing about a meal in Spain is the after-dinner conversation. A Spaniard cannot conceive of spending half an hour on a meal and then getting up from the table. That is almost a sacrilege and a mockery for the other diners who accompany him. The after-dinner conversation is the way in which they all share, debate, exchange ideas, and enjoy leisure and company around a coffee, a dessert, or some typical drink. Dessert is an extension of the meal, sometimes much longer than the meal, which every classic Spaniard practices as something natural and fun. One conclusion of all this story is that we Spaniards find it difficult to describe what we are as a people, but apart from the hospitality and friendliness of the people, at least we are 100% in agreement on something, and in which we can consider ourselves different. We have the two best things in the world, gastronomy and dessert.